Most people picture the deadliest aircraft of World War II as roaring machines of steel and aluminum. But one of the most feared planes of the war wasn't made of metal at all. It was built out of wood. When the de Havilland Mosquito first slashed across European skies, German pilots scrambled to identify it. Their first reports radioed back in disbelief. This must be some secret American project. No one in the Luftwaffe could believe that something crafted in furniture workshops from spruce and balsa could outfly the most advanced German fighters. Yet behind that disbelief lay a brutal truth. Nicknamed the Wooden Wonder, the Mosquito could outpace and outmaneuver its metal adversaries, despite having no defensive guns and no armour. It was so unconventional that many in Britain's own air ministry tried to kill the project more than once. They dismissed it as a fantasy, a waste of resources, and even branded it Freeman's Folly, after Air Marshal Wilfred Freeman, who stubbornly supported it. But by late 1940, the prototype's blistering speed was undeniable. The Mosquito rewrote the rules of air combat, leaving the Luftwaffe scrambling in a desperate technological race. It was not just another bomber, it was a statement. Heavy, gun-laden aircraft suddenly looked like lumbering relics of a fading doctrine. So how did a fragile, gunless wooden prototype evolve into one of the most versatile and feared aircraft of the entire war? And what did it truly cost to gamble everything on speed and vision, instead of firepower and tradition? The story begins in the spring of 1940. Inside the corridors of the British Air Ministry, Geoffrey de Havilland, a designer already known for bold ideas, presented a proposal unlike anything on the table. His vision, a twin-engine bomber with no guns, no armour, and a lightweight wooden frame. To traditionalists it sounded like madness. To de Havilland it was Britain's best hope to outfly the Luftwaffe. Official correspondence from the time captures the tension. Lord Beaverbrook, Minister of Aircraft Production, wanted resources poured into proven metal bombers like the Wellington and the Halifax. He sneered at the very idea, declaring that wood belonged in pianos, not warplanes. But Freeman saw the potential and staked his career on it. Letters exchanged between Freeman and de Havilland read like a pact sealed under fire. Both men knew one miscalculation could doom them, and perhaps Britain's aerial future. By December, after endless debates and waves of scepticism, Freeman forced through an initial order for 150 Mosquitoes, before a single one had even been tested in combat. The Air Ministry was stunned. For the first time, innovation and sheer speed had been chosen over tradition and firepower. The fate of the Wooden Wonder now rested on whether it could prove more than just a beautiful idea. On a cold November morning in 1940, the prototype Mosquito finally left the runway at Hatfield Airfield. Its twin Merlin engines roared like a challenge to the skeptics who had dismissed it as a fragile toy. Instead of rattling under stress, the aircraft climbed smoothly into the grey sky, its wooden frame cutting through the clouds with an elegance that no steel bomber could match. The airframe was a marvel of craftsmanship. Built from carefully layered spruce and balsa, glued and pressed with precision, it was as much a creation of artisans as of engineers. Marine varnish sealed its insides, protecting it from damp European winters, a small but crucial detail that meant the difference between longevity and rot. For months, furniture makers, piano craftsmen and carpenters had worked in secrecy, channeling their skills not into living rooms or concert halls, but into war machines. At the controls that day was Geoffrey de Havilland Jr., the son of the designer himself. He pushed the prototype hard, testing its limits. What happened next silenced doubters. The Mosquito roared past 380 miles per hour, faster even than the famous Spitfire. Engineers and RAF officers on the ground stood in stunned silence as the wooden frame shimmered under the pale winter sun. Wood, shaped by human hands, had just outperformed steel forged in factories. Reports of the test reached the Air Ministry within days, and the numbers spoke louder than any memo. No armour, no guns, but a speed so great that an enemy fighter could barely catch it, let alone hold it in its sights. The decision to order 150 aircraft, once seen as reckless, now looked visionary. By September 1941, the Mosquito was declared fully operational. Production lines sprang up not in traditional aircraft factories, but in woodworking shops across Britain. Every plane carried the fingerprints of hundreds of craftsmen, cabinet makers, coach builders, even violin makers, working quietly in sheds and workshops to piece together Britain's fastest warplane. The gamble had paid off. The Wooden Wonder was no longer just a prototype, it was ready for war. But the Mosquito was no easy machine to master. Pilots who trained on it quickly realised that it demanded absolute discipline. Its light frame and massive engines gave it an unmatched power-to-weight ratio, but also made it dangerously unforgiving. Instructors drilled one number into the heads of recruits: 172 miles per hour. If an engine failed during takeoff and the plane dropped below that threshold, control was lost. The Mosquito would flip, stall and smash into the ground before a pilot had time to react. Board of Inquiry reports are filled with grim reminders of this reality. Many crews never survived their first mishap. Veterans described it not as flying the Mosquito, but negotiating with it. Always careful, always alert. As historian Bill Sweetman later wrote, "You didn't fly a Mosquito, you bargained with it." Still, for those who mastered the aircraft's temperament, it offered something almost mythical: the ability to outrun death itself. On January 30th, 1943, the heart of Nazi Germany trembled. That morning, Berlin's air raid sirens wailed as sleek Mosquito bombers raced over the city at terrifying speed. Their engines howled above the rooftops just minutes before Hermann Göring, head of the Luftwaffe, was scheduled to give a national broadcast. The timing was surgical. British planners had orchestrated the raid down to the second, ensuring that the roar of Merlin engines and the thunder of high explosives drowned out German propaganda. The strike was more than an attack. It was humiliation. For 220 consecutive nights, Mosquito squadrons would return to Berlin and other critical cities, cutting through the Reich's illusion of invulnerability. They didn't just drop bombs, they disrupted speeches, blacked out radio broadcasts and shattered the confidence of a population told they were untouchable. German fighter squadrons scrambled again and again, but it was a losing game. The Mosquitoes were too fast. By the time interceptors reached altitude, the British bombers were gone, slipping back into the clouds like ghosts. Luftwaffe diaries from the period are heavy with frustration, their entries repeating the same complaint: "We cannot catch them." Inside the Nazi high command, tempers boiled. Göring himself exploded in anger during a staff meeting, delivering one of his most famous admissions of defeat: "I turn green with envy when I see the Mosquito." The British knocked together a beautiful wooden aircraft, and every German pilot wishes he had one. It was not just envy, it was despair. Every Mosquito raid forced the Reich to divert resources, rethink its air defences, and chase an enemy it could never quite pin down. German engineers scrambled to design faster fighters, but the Mosquito always seemed one step ahead. Each successful British mission chipped away at German morale, and each frustrated chase deepened Göring's rage. What terrified the Luftwaffe most was not only the speed of the Mosquito, but its versatility. The same airframe that humiliated Berlin as a precision bomber could, with only minor modifications, transform into a night fighter, a reconnaissance plane, or even a pathfinder guiding heavy bombers to their targets. No other aircraft of the war adapted so easily, and no other design caused such a strategic headache for the enemy. The Mosquito was more than a weapon. It was a symbol that Britain, even under the pressure of nightly bombing raids and dwindling resources, could outthink and outfly the Reich. And in Berlin, every wail of the siren reminded civilians and commanders alike that the Wooden Wonder was still out there, always striking at the most embarrassing moment. The genius of the Mosquito was not only in its speed, but in its ability to become whatever the war demanded. A single wooden airframe could be reborn in dozens of forms. By the end of the war, no fewer than 40 distinct versions had flown in combat, each one adapted for a new role without ever changing the plane's essential character. Some Mosquitoes were bristling with firepower, their noses packed with 420mm Hispano cannons and 4.303 machine guns, making them lethal night fighters. Others carried no weapons at all, stripped bare so that cameras could peer deep into enemy territory. These reconnaissance Mosquitoes captured the first photographs of Germany's secret V1 and V2 rocket sites, evidence that shaped Allied strategy and fueled the bombing campaigns that followed. Pathfinder variants were painted in high-visibility markings and loaded with flares. They flew ahead of lumbering bomber streams, marking targets with precision, so that heavy aircraft like Lancasters and Halifaxes could rain destruction exactly where it mattered. In the dark skies above Europe, The Mosquito's speed meant it could evade interception even when lit up like a beacon. Other versions turned into shadow hunters. Painted jet black equipped with radar, they stalked German bombers and fighters at night, striking before the enemy even knew they were there. To Luftwaffe pilots, the sudden flash of cannon fire from an unseen Mosquito was a death sentence. But versatility did not end there. The same design became a courier, rushing vital intelligence across enemy lines. It became a weather observer, braving storms to provide forecasts for D-Day. It became a trainer for new recruits, and even a target tug for gunnery practice. Each task required only minor modifications, because the heart of the Mosquito's design was flexibility itself. From British airfields to outposts in Burma and the jungles of the Pacific, the wooden silhouette of the Mosquito kept reappearing in new guises, always faster, always ahead of the enemy's response. No other aircraft of its generation could be so easily reinvented, and no other machine demonstrated that a single idea, speed over armour, agility over brute force, could dominate so many arenas of war. The Mosquito was no longer just a bomber or a fighter. It was a template for the modern multi-role combat aircraft, decades before the term even existed. By the war's end, the Mosquito had flown thousands of sorties, from lightning raids over Berlin to precision strikes like Operation Jericho, to reconnaissance missions that revealed Germany's most guarded secrets. It had humiliated the Luftwaffe, baffled Hermann Göring, and forced the Reich to divert resources in vain attempts to counter a plane that could not be caught. What began as Freeman's folly, mocked as a wooden fantasy, became one of the most feared and versatile aircraft of the entire conflict. Its speed rewrote aerial doctrine, its adaptability made it a chameleon of the skies, and its very construction, built in furniture shops and piano factories by craftsmen who had never imagined their skills would shape the fate of nations, proved that innovation could arise from the unlikeliest of places. Historians now view the Mosquito as the prototype of the modern multi-role aircraft. It was not bound by a single task, but could become a bomber, a fighter, a scout, or a pathfinder as the war demanded. Its legacy is measured not just in the raids it flew, but in the way it changed the thinking of air warfare itself. The Mosquito was no myth. It was proof, flying proof, that speed, ingenuity, and vision could overcome tradition and brute force. And though it was born of wood, glue, and varnish, it left behind a legacy stronger than steel.